Hello. Hi, everyone. I wonder if I'm audible right now there. Is it? I got to learn how to speak into the scarf a little bit better. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's workshop. This is just a brief talk about shamanic herbalism and mushrooms and how they work, why they were used, and how we found the herbs that work today for the purposes that we use them for. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a moment to clear my nerves and breathe for a second. And I'm also going to humbly dedicate this discussion to the liberation of all beings from suffering, that all beings who suffer, which is all of us at some time or another, will find meaning and release from it, and that all sentient beings be delivered by at least by a little bit of the goodness that this generates. So I'll take a moment of silence right now, and then we'll talk about herbs. Om Guru Brahma, Om Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurudev Namaha. I humbly dedicate any education, any benefit that I pass along, however small or slight, to the liberation of all sentient beings. Thank you guys for joining me today. So I've been a student of herbalism for about 7 years. I began teaching myself at around the age of 24 or 25 because I come from a family that has herbalism in it. I was raised by a family from the Philippines, and I'm obviously, you may tell by looking at me that I'm not Filipino, but I have an adopted Asian family, many of whom were used to taking things like soursop, which is used oftentimes for cancer treatments, mango leaves, neem leaves, etc. And when I was around 22, I was placed in acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine for some lung problems I was having. So I'm very fortunate among Westerners to have had the experience of healing through traditional means. And gratefully, I think that we've really seen a lot more Westerners and Americans and people who have never even left their home country or state exposed to these cultures. So when I began to learn herbalism on my own, I was expanding to Griffith Park, which is an area of wild preserve nature in Los Angeles. Several classes with a teacher named Will Browen. And on my first class there, I remember we were walking towards a number of kind of peaks in the middle of Griffith Park, like dangerous Griffith Park, where if you aren't walking on a cleared path already, you could fall into stinging nettle or fall into like a part of, a cactus or something. So it was a little bit dangerous. And he said to us off in the distance, "Look over there. Do you guys see that datura plant?" Datura is a beautiful plant that's also known as angel's trumpet. And it kind of has this compound in it that's similar to what's known as scopolamine, the twilight sleep drug. It's used for terrible purposes on the illicit market, the black market for drugs. It's also used for pharmaceutical purposes when being put under for a tooth procedure or for surgery. And in other countries, it's used just if somebody has to knock out and go to sleep after a long travel. But he said to us, "This is a plant that we don't use in the West. Can anyone tell me why?" I was like, "You're the teacher, so I don't know why." But I thought because it's dangerous. And he said, "Almost any herb can be dangerous, but we do not live in a shamanic society. So we do not have the evolution alongside this plant to have really grown with it and have learned its lesson throughout generations." That really affected me. I know there's a lot of beautiful cultures that do have shamanic, psychedelic, and even dangerous plant treatments. I know in Central and Eastern Africa, we have the practice of iboga, and iboga is used for everything from, asthma and hypertension, just getting over a bad breakup or grieving a lost loved one. And we also have in the West now, we're seeing this kind of emergence and even commercialization of the use of drugs like psilocybin, which really we know is extracted from a mushroom. LSD, also extracted from a mushroom, and Amanita muscaria, which is extracted from this beautiful red mushroom that my teacher and friend Yori, the moon priestess, works with. And she comes from a Siberian and Mongolian lineage. She's also Korean as well. And all of those cultures are shamanic societies, pre-industrialization and colonization. So her experience with this book, Healing with Amanita Muscaria, talks about her healing her own heart, healing her own relational patterns, going through and taking Amanita Muscaria and having the experience of being able to look at herself and actually learn from her mistakes. Amanita Muscaria is kind of an iconic mushroom. It's seen on like all continents, if I'm not mistaken, except Antarctica. I would hate to see this growing in Antarctica because Antarctica doesn't need plants, but I always think it's funny to think of something growing on every continent except there. Anyway, but one beautiful thing about it is that it grows where it's easy. It grows where it's also very challenged and very hostile. A lot of the Amanita in the market is taken from the Siberian regions of the world, Mongolia, Russia, northeastern Europe, and China as well. And you'll see that it shows up in a lot of traditional cultures. Japan has a folktale about a man who eats a red mushroom and has to sort of make a decision about his life with it. Then in the Scandinavian cultures, they also have stories of people witnessing reindeer eating Amanita muscaria mushrooms and then beginning to fly. There's even some speculation that the way that we see Santa Claus is sort of an abstracted over many years of folktale and illustration and weaving and storytelling, that it's just a little white nose with the red hat and then the white little pom-pom on top. So it's become a symbol of Christmas, it's become a symbol of healing, and it's also, in the Western world, we see it as a symbol of danger or as a symbol of something being toxic or dangerous to the mind. A lot of people, when I Googled Amanita muscaria, the first thing that came up is, will you die if you eat Amanita muscaria? I later watched a Joe Rogan podcast interview where he said, he spoke to the mycologist, he spoke to a famous mycologist about his experience taking Amanita. And while he wasn't taking Amanita muscaria, he was taking another one called Amanita panthertina. He talked about how time stopped for him and he felt like he was going to be sick and how he was stuck in a time loop and it was very challenging for him. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. And not only is it misinformation, it's actually not backed up by evidence. We have seen through this book and the other book, which is called microdosing Amanita muscaria. The Amanita, when used in small doses, is effective as an energy regulation tool. It's used when used in like coffee, it can help counteract the effects of caffeine, making it less jittery to the system. Amanita muscaria will work on the brain in the same parts that drugs like gabapentin, Lyrica, Xanax, benzodiazepines, and even alcohol will do. But thankfully, it doesn't have any of the negative side effects. It's not habit forming, and it hasn't been shown to be as dangerous as any of those drugs. It's amazing to think that shamanic herbalism is actually the root of what we now call pharmaceutical medicine. If we were to look at all of the roots of pharmaceutical medicine, we will find a story of someone encountering an animal eating a plant and either getting sick or having another experience off of it. To me, if I had to speculate, I think about the flying reindeer in Northern Europe, and I imagine maybe the reindeer were just sort of sick or tired. And after eating it, they had a benefit of feeling better. We know that Amanita muscaria helps with peripheral nervous pain and central nervous system relief for things like tremors, things like dyskinesia, so like uncontrollable, unwanted, and unending motor movements. It's also beneficial for people who struggle with epilepsy. And so while this isn't really a discussion, me trying to sell you on the mushroom, I hope you can see that a lot of the ways that we think of plants being dangerous is actually the first step towards it becoming medicine, and then later becoming commercialized as medicine in the industrial world. I know that there's actually a Fortune 500 traded company called Cybin, which is taken from the Latin word psilocybin, which means the bald-headed mushroom of the little, brown mushrooms that people used in Mexico for ritual purposes, and are now beloved by hippies and normal herbalists like me as well. So it's just one interesting thing to think about, that we are told that we don't live in a shamanic society, but maybe we do. And maybe there's shamans like my teacher, Priestess Yuri, the moon priestess, out there who have taken the risk upon themselves, documented their experience with so much generosity. There's people like Swamiji, who's hosting our event today, who've undergone huge transformations, whether it be through things as simple as fasting and prayer and meditation, or people who have undergone actual transformation through the pharmaceutical system and seen the end of the tunnel and found their way out that way. I think that we are actually in some way all called to be shamans by telling our stories of healing. And the first step to healing is teaching others how something helped you. The other day, I had a beautiful experience with Amanita muscaria. And one thing about me is that I sometimes struggle with a little bit of disfluent speech. I have a brother who's a speech language pathologist, so while I don't have an actual stutter, I do sometimes struggle to get words out in the proper fluency and order and volume that I want to. And I feared my whole life that it made me look not smart or look silly. And especially with something as, kind of controversial and laughed at in American society anyway, is herbalism. A lot of people will think, well, you want to be an herbalist because you couldn't be a regular doctor, or, if herbal medicine worked, it would just be called medicine. There's a lot of sort of flippant lines about it. I was graciously given a little bottle of Amanita muscaria tincture made by Moon Priestess Yuri, and I was so grateful to see that actually I stopped being afraid to speak in front of you guys, and I've taken a little bit before this as well, and I'm happy to give out samples as well to explain that to you. There's so many wonderful herbs, and the shamanic practices behind them are all different and come from different passages of cultural history. The story that you find in this is that the Siberian shamanic leaders would actually eat whole caps of Amanita muscaria, which grows from anything from the size of a thumbnail to the size of like a big cup or almost a dinner plate. It grows in many different sizes. And then they would collect the urine that comes from the shaman who has eaten it. And then when it's boiled down, that becomes medicine. That sounds really kind of frightening in old world until we become aware of the fact that this is a common practice even in pharmaceutical medicine today. The drug Premarin, which is a hormonal replacement therapy drug, comes from the urine of horses. Thank you. You know exactly. Are you a pharmacist?
No.
You're a nurse? You want to get up here and talk about all this stuff instead of me? My goodness. But yeah, and also we've known that that's been a common practice, that feeding, for example, goats or cows a certain herb and then collecting their urine and turning it into a powder and then putting that on your body is used in Indian traditional medicine called Ayurveda, or in other practices like Native North American medicine, particularly in Canada, where they have long winters. And if you have to preserve your medicine, there's not always the opportunity to grow it for so long. So this is a fascinating book that I really enjoy. If anyone has any questions about herbal medicine or would like to discuss their experiences or mushrooms or anything else, I would love to talk more about it. I just have a brief moment of my own story to tell, but I thought I would share that all with you. So thank you all.
Meaning, like, if you're in sobriety, you're not going to take this because that could be maybe altered.
Yeah. So sobriety is go ahead.
Is this a class C?
So Amanita muscaria is actually legal in all states except for the state of Louisiana, and that comes from like a 1700s law. So it's more of a statutory law than anything else. I know that they sell it for decoration purposes. They sell it in little ornaments. They sell it for ritual purposes, not to be consumed.
I'm just asking if it's just like regular.
So it's not actually classified as a drug.
I've done cycling for mushrooms.
Yes.
That was before I was sober. Then I go to AA and I say, hi, I just did this mushroom. Then I might have to count days again because I'm altered. So I'm trying to find out if it's an altered substance or is it? It is.
So for those of you who didn't hear, one of our wonderful guests was just asking whether taking Amanita muscaria would affect your sobriety, if you're in a 12-step or a sobriety group, or whether it counts as some sort of drug. I was mistaken. I thought you were asking whether it was like a scheduled drug by the FDA.
Yes. Yeah. And we all have to know like if it's clean, because if it's not, and then you have an unfortunate experience, then you're hung.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have to go figure that one.
It's going to depend on
like give me a minute. But I'm asking you if it's what I'm asking. If it's sobriety or not.
I would say because it actually affects the GABA receptors in the brain and not the serotonin, and there are any sort of it's not really psychedelic in the same way as, like, for example, magic mushrooms are. You're not really going to have visuals or anything else. I don't imagine that unless you've taken what's called a heroic dose, which is someone who's intentionally taking on a shamanic experience basically for themselves one-on-one, that you'd really have anything that would alter your sobriety. However, I completely and totally love and respect the 12-step community, and for that reason, I would say because it is technically a deliriant, it does cause a slight amount of altered perception of time. If you take enough of it, it does take an even slight amount of. I beg your pardon? You wanted to? In a small amount, it's used to just kind of calm the central nervous system, like all GABA agonists. Yeah. If you're interested in another herb that would do this, that will not affect your sobriety, one thing I would strongly recommend would be oat seed. Oat seed, like yes, oat, like oatmeal, like yes. So the seeds of oats produce a milky latex. You'll sometimes see it called milky oat tops. You can see it preserved in glycerin. You can even buy them yourselves and just turn it into a tea. That is completely yes, oat seed. Absolutely, yeah. It's oat, OAT, like oatmeal. It's very calming to the nervous system. You'll buy it from an herbal store like Mountain Rose Herbs or iHerb.com. Yeah. So for those of you who are interested in a similar herb, a non-shamanic herb that's less dangerous, carries fewer risks, is not a delirium, I would also recommend milky oat tops.
Oat seed, you would heat it up in a pot.
Yeah. So you would buy oat straw, which is basically the cut and sifted straw that comes from oats. It's a cereal grain. It actually grows wild here in Southern California. The plant is called Avena sativa. Sativa just means cultivated, means it's a grain, and then or it's been like a farmed item. Avena means oats. Those of you who speak Spanish will know that Avena also means oatmeal or oats in your language. And so you'll find Avena sativa oat straw. It's just the cut and sifted grain of it. You'll put it in very hot water, let it sit overnight, and drink the water. It's excellent for nervousness, for essential tremor. If you have sort of like an eyelid that twitches, or if your teeth chatter a lot, it's beneficial for that.
So it resets the sympathetic to it.
Yes, to the parasympathetic phase, the rest and digest phase.
Wow.
Virtually every herb, mushroom or otherwise, or even pharmaceutical drug that wants to get you into a parasympathetic state will also make your body more moist. It will improve digestion, help your body produce tears, help your mouth produce more saliva. You'll also, if you have a lot of dry skin or dryness when you pass urine or use the toilet or something, it'll also benefit you in that way. Oat seed is used for that, women who have to give birth, for that reason, to sort of lubricate the whole body, just because a woman's body blood volume, doubles so much, and they need a lot of hydration. So that will also happen if you take Amanita muscaria, which shows kind of the interesting trends that we notice when the body goes through a healing state. I had a traditional Chinese medicine doctor tell me that every single person he'd ever seen in America was chronically dehydrated, and he told me that I was one of the worst he had seen. So, food for thought. In America, just our pace of life does dehydrate us. It dries us out. And also, we are truly burning the midnight oil just from our pace of life, from the amount of just the pace of the content that we view, the amount of stimulants we have to take just to support our way of life and industrialized culture. So those of you who are on a sobriety journey, I would love to talk to you about oat seed as well, which is not available here, not used in the shamanic practices, but it's a classic Western herbalism. It's also used in Ayurveda in Ayurveda, it's called the herb or the leaf of immortality. So yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments?
Give us more questions, give us more recipes. Like if you want to get off caffeine and you're like, you know what, I want that jolt, that feeling, the brain's flying, it's moving on a go, but not feeling like the mind is, that you feel like you could still eat, where caffeine, you have a cup of coffee or whatever that is, and you're good as a fast for like a good 5-6 hours until you're hungry.
For those who are asking, our guest just asked, is there any such herb that's stimulating for the mind, that gives you energy, gives you focus, but will still allow you to eat? And yes, again, this was going to come from Eastern herbalism, particularly the herbalism in nations like Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. They are famous for having long studying hours. Their school lasts longer than the school in the United States or in other Western nations. And oftentimes I've heard a rumor, it's just an herbal lore, herbal legend, I have more herbal lore if you're interested, that they'll give the students something called Centella asiatica. Centella asiatica is a herb called Gotu Kola, Gotu space Kola. It is a topical anti-inflammatory, so it's often used in a lot of beauty skincare. If you have like pimples, I actually struggled with cystic acne for many years, and Gotu Kola is a beautiful herb for that. It's also known as a studier's herb or a student's herb. So it's meant to give you clean energy, stimulating enough for students who are in school. It's not the same thing as coffee. There are cultures where they give coffee to children. I've been told that in Guatemala, Honduras, Lower Mexico, etc., they actually mix coffee into the milk, and that actually helps increase the caffeine tolerance for children, especially those who work on farms where they're exposed to caffeinated herbs like that. Yes.
Question. The Centella asiatica.
Yeah, so you can just look up Centella. Centella
Centella
asiatica. Asiatica is Latin for it grows in Asia, which is again very
And
Western
what does it
centric.
look like, and how is it consumed by the students in India, Thailand?
I've never been there, so I'm sure there's many ways that it's taken. I would say that I think it's eaten as a salad, eaten and crushed up and used in supplements. I know that there's also tea of it in the West. We kind of are more comfortable in America. I guess we just don't like to eat our vegetables and herbs. We like to take them as medicine instead, which is better than nothing. But I found it in tincture form. So a tincture is an herbal preparation made in alcohol or glycerin. Technically in glycerin it's called a glycerite, but it'll just be called tinctures on like Amazon.
So let's just say if they eat it as a salad,
Yes.
like a topping for a salad.
Yeah.
Is there a dose limit? How much would you put on a salad?
You know, dosage when it comes to herbs is always going to be an interesting topic because the herbs that are the most dangerous to eat in a great amount are going to be the ones that are aromatic. So if you were to eat, for example, a pound of lavender, well, that story doesn't exist because you would be so dry, your face would be on fire because of how much essential oil would be passing through your lips. It would just be impossible to eat it. You know, we have the same sort of anecdote about it's impossible to overdose on marijuana. It is technically possible, but you'd have to inhale so much smoke and eat so much. You know, the doses of the micronutrients of the beneficial herbal compounds that we find in plants are so minor because we're meant to eat a lot of plants, right? Like we have these grinding teeth because we have this like omnivorous, you know, body system that we have. So you could eat like a whole salad and you can't really overdose, in my opinion, on Centella asiatica. But if you wanted to take a herbal supplement, usually the recommended dose is going to be listed on the bottle. If it's in a little 1 ounce bottle, they're usually going to formulate it so that 1 dropper, 2 droppers if you're over 200 pounds, or if you're a larger person, or if you're a bigger man with a lot of muscle, that would be around the dose.
One last question.
Yes.
So if you're driving a long distance or working a long day,
Yeah.
and you just want to stay alert,
Yeah.
I don't want the caffeine effect.
Yeah.
I want to be relaxed. I just want to stay awake.
Yeah.
But not too. No.
I didn't
So-
catch that. What was that?
I was confused.
Well, people actually do chew coca leaves. That's another example of shamanic herbalism being turned into a commercialized drug.
Yeah, but what if you're sensitive? If you're sensitive to caffeine,
Yes.
or I don't want to do cocoa leaves, I don't
Yeah,
want anything.
yeah.
Sometimes I'll have like a little piece of dark chocolate.
What
Yeah.
about the saffron for them now?
Saffron is a beautiful herb. I've seen it actually used a lot for attention and mood regulation. For those who take SSRIs or SNRIs, which are 2 classes of pharmaceutical drugs that affect the brain's
Amy
neurotransmitters.
He's my doctor who does the
Yes.
scans for the brain. And then
Yes.
Kim Kardashian, they were talking about the happy saffron.
Yes, saffron is used for ADHD. I can help you right now. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you, like, you mentioned marijuana.
Yeah.
And people talk about the benefits of marijuana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything has pros and cons.
Yes. Yes.
What are
Absolutely.
the cons about marijuana? No one really advertises.
Yeah, so the cons of cannabis are going to be different for every person. In other traditional, longer civilizations, for example, India, Native North American civilization, Native Mexican civilization, many of these traditional medical systems have discussed different constitutions. So for different herbal medicines, we're going to be seeing which ones do they benefit for which types. For example, I'll speak about myself just because I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner, but I do know my dosha, which means my energetic and elemental type in that herbal system. I am something called Kapha Pitta, which means that I am a very watery, soft, easily warmed, easily heated up individual. I have a lot of red in my face. I have a lot of red in my hair.
That's your Ayurvedic body type.
Yes, everyone is considered a combination of 1 or 2 doshas. Maybe the perfect individual would be 1, but many people are a combination of 2 doshas, are called tri-dosha, which means they are involved Kapha, Pitta, and Vata, which are the 3 constitutions. A classic Vata would be someone like Mick Jagger, kind of thin and wiry with a lot like a classic Kapha would be someone who's got full-figured, big cheeks that are always shining. A classic Pitta would be like a football player who's got a lot of muscle and very sharp and got the sharp gaze, I would say for cannabis in particular, cannabis as we know it today and the way that it's being cultivated, I find that the commercialization of cannabis has made it become stronger and stronger, that it does resemble, in my opinion, I'm not a cannabis grower or a bud tender or anything, and I greatly respect the work of people who've taken it. I've also taken it medically myself. I find that it's resembling more of a pharmaceutical product than it did in generations past. So I find that it's become something that's a little bit more, it's become so sort of potentized. You can even see cartridges that have, however many milligrams and however many,
Very strong.
Precisely. So I don't know that it really represents what it used to mean herbally. That said, for anyone who struggles with dryness anywhere in their constitution, whether they have slow digestion, whether they feel like more acid when they swallow a lot of food, if they have like a full stomach and it just feels like it's full of air. I struggle not with dryness but with heat. I actually don't need a jacket most days. I can just kind of throw on a scarf. So cannabis, generally speaking, is a drying, heating herb.
And I have heard of there are people who smoke it.
Yes.
Actually, even on fire creates carbon, so it removes the carbon.
Yeah.
And then there's people who just eat it in like a brownie, things like that.
Yeah.
Aside from the smoking part, when you want to burning the lungs and things.
Herbal smoking has been a tradition in every single culture. You're going to find smoking of herbs. I have tried herbs smoked, even though I have asthma, and I found that it's not my favorite way of taking it. But I would recommend that if anyone does try smoking, an herb, that they would try an organic variety in a very low dose with a clean burning paper or in a pipe of some sort. The only thing I really can recommend smoking would be mullein, which is used by the native North American people, as well as all over Europe, because it is the only herb that I'm aware of that actually helps you expectorate and produce and spit out mucus that's collecting in the chest. That's called mullein, mullein. And if you ever drive across the southwestern or western North America, you'll see it has these big fuzzy leaves, and it sort of grows up like a beautiful candle. I've seen which is stick in some sort of like hippie stores like that where they sell
Is
it.
that good for asthma?
It's excellent for asthma. Another great herb for asthma would be elecampane. So there's actually a beautiful, I'm not here to promote any product, but there is a beautiful remedy that I would, there's a number of similar, but almost every herb has a website, will have a lung blend, and it'll almost always include mullein, eucalyptus, campaign, osho root, and garlic, something like that. A number of roots that will make coughing more effective, so you can actually get the mucus out, get the fluid out if you have like an infection in there, and also be a little bit astringent and drying, so that when you cough, you're not like just coughing and coughing and coughing with no relief.
So there is a limit to someone who's taking too much marijuana. They could be